Some Battlefield maps are great, others are terrible. The vast majority lies somewhere in between, elevated by a unique feature or held back by a critical flaw. Often some of the most divisive and popular levels in the series, these are the mid-tier maps of Battlefield. A do-over. Yes, it's true and it needs to be done. Grand Bazaar's original inclusion in the Best Maps category was a mistake. It kept bothering me, not only because it was a stretch, but also because it went against my own criteria for what makes for great Battlefield map design. In that regard, it also began to screw up my process for analyzing other maps which more or less fit the same benchmark. After all, why should Grand Bazaar get a pass, while a high mid-tier map like Epicenter get punished, even though the latter plays significantly better on average? This was an error on my part, and one which I hope never to make again. Thankfully, most of the original argument stands true, so with some minor alterations, this is Battlefield 3's Market of Grenade Spam itself, Grand Bazaar. A Battlefield 3 launch map which soared to fame almost immediately, Grand Bazaar is a small-scale design set near the Tehran city center. It is known for its fast-paced infantry-dominated action, high-stakes flanking maneuvers, IFV domination, and lots of explosive spam, especially at the alley in the heart of the map. The atmosphere is cloudy and somewhat dark, accentuating the ongoing heavy rain throughout the round. Consequently, a lot of map details are wet, showing water running off the sides of buildings for a cool effect. The storm brings a heavy wind with it, greatly obscuring visibility down longer sightlines, but definitely creating a unique battle environment. Bazaar's Conquest variants concentrate the entire playable area within a rectangular cluster of apartments, streets, and numerous small alleys inside. Each team's main base extends into one of the corners. For the US, the top left, and for the RU, the bottom right. The main roads which surround the market form the border of the map, with a few minor hallways running along the boundaries to sneak around. The two Conquest variants of Grand Bazaar are exceptionally similar. Conquest Large is a 5-flag layout, while Conquest Small retains only the center 3. Both versions possess a lone IFV capable of carrying a team to victory. The main roads provide the most exposed areas of the map, with lengthy straightaways and tight corners where the IFVs roam constantly. A few nooks in the adjacent buildings provide some cover, and in a few locations, 2- and 3-story open staircases offer protected high ground to snipers and squads with spawn beacons. Along these main roads, the D and E flags can be found on the top right and bottom left corners of the map, respectively. The Delta flag in the northeast is the Junction, a small, slightly difficult to capture objective due to its position in the far corner with limited nearby detail. A small concrete wall and destructible bus sat in radius and could be used for cover, as could the adjacent empty shop. A back alley allowed respawning players some protection if they were lucky, but many spawn points here placed new soldiers out in view of the streets or down the lengthy corridor nearby. It was also very difficult to cross the road to weed out hiding players or enter the capture radius due to its emptiness, roaming vehicles, and long sightlines. The E flag located in the southwest is the highway. This pedestrian overpass is the most open objective zone on the map, defined by the intersection of the upper-level highway and a smaller east-west road leading to the market. Cover is limited to the overpass pylons, a dumpster, and a few bushes, such as they are. Firing angles from all around make attempting to capture exceptionally dangerous, and usually the IFVs are involved. New spawn locations here are also some of the most frustrating, with at least 3 of them being placed out in the open along the map border and often watched intensely. A larger, more detailed area can be found on each side of the map adjacent to each team's starting location. On the US side, this is the A flag, the parking lot. Here, several parked cars fill in the lot beside a few dumpsters and concrete walls. The allotted cover is substantial, at least until a series of battles destroys most of it. Even so, the car wreckage, dumpsters, pillars to the building next door, and the stairs to the street walkway all provide long-term fortifications. On the opposite side, the C flag consisted of an open food market filled with tightly packed vendor stalls and a few minor buildings. Like the A objective, this area is prone to destruction, as all of the stalls can be leveled with only the small concrete structures able to provide cover in lengthy rounds. A high-rise stairway near the objective faces the main road and is one of the map's most advantageous positions, as it overlooks all activity over the flag and many RU deployment locations. A great defensive and ratty position, players typically fought hard for each floor, often placing spawn beacons higher up and C4 on the steps. A large footpath connecting the A and C zones literally defines player experiences on the map. Here, herding together to avoid the openness and IFE danger of the main roads, the majority of both teams would collide with explosive force intent on capturing the alleyway B flag in the center. Smaller back alleys and alcoves near the point provide minor rooms for players to spawn and use as cover, while adjacent doorways and concrete blocks provide rough alternatives. A number of connecting alleyways fed into this middle street, allowing for some secondary lanes. The famous banana curved hall on the Russian side led to the market, while the tighter and more exposed dumpster alley led to the small hookah shop. Another path led through a series of buildings out toward the D flag. Ultimately, this street observed some of the most intense fighting on a map outside of Operation Metro. The close proximity of both teams, large amount of players, minor cover, and limited room to maneuver created an absolute grind now legendary in the Battlefield series. Every player seemed to have their own preference. Unlimited grenade throwing near an ammo box, laying prone at the end of the street with an LMG. Others throwing C4, medics revive padding for points, rockets flying down the alley, mortars landing inside, and the ever-present infantry pro racking up plenty of assault rifle kills camping a doorway or diving around a corner. As this middle street connected to the north and south main roads, it also allowed either team's IFE or the armored transports to park themselves outside, firing rounds all the way through and finding kills on the other side. The egregious chaos of the center alley was only avoidable to a point, what with the outside roads leading around. This did give it an advantage over the inescapability of Operation Metro and improved the design substantially. However, given the often watched and open border roads, more connecting alleys out to the east and west were probably required to space players adequately, provide additional flanking options, and alleviate the explosive spam, screen shake, and door blocking, another serious Battlefield 3 problem. As a result, experiences on Grand Bazaar varied heavily. If you enjoyed the choke point grind and infantry chaos, it was definitely for you. If you hated being killed all the time via poor spawn locations and explosive spam, well, you suffered, especially when Battlefield 3's poor netcode was involved. Getting shot around corners or from enemies you couldn't see was common. As just mentioned, the tight clustering of players often body-blocked many into the explosive street and unable to retreat to safety. The longer main roads, albeit with unique rubble piles, destroyed cars, and minor obstacles for cover, still often gave snipers too much of an advantage. Many doorways, alleys, and stairs were also frequently littered with claymores. But a major problem of the map was the IFE, or rather, a strong IFE coupled with an aggressive team. While it was typical for each team's IFE to respawn and rotate around the rectangular streets, a dominant player could quickly capture a flag with knowledge of the poor spawn points nearby. As a result, Grand Bazaar, with even a slight mismatch in team quality or playstyle or just sheer luck, would spiral into a full capture of objectives, and due to the cornered main base deployments, an overwhelming and unbreakable base camp for the remainder of the match would occur, which could last an absurd amount of time given Battlefield 3's slow ticket drop rate. These deployment zones were not a sufficient design to provide any meaningful breakout attempt. The US side had it worse, with the entire team spawning in the back road around the corner. Here, the IFE could be spawn camped the moment it appeared. A minor alley out the back was always watched, and the only other alternative was to cross the open street into another choke point. The Russian team, despite also being camped in heavily, at the very least had an eastern alley out past the buildings and into the right road. While usually also watched, this was the best option, since the large archways found in front of the market were typically locked down hard. Grand Bazaar did find its way into the series again, making a second appearance in Battlefield Hardline of all places. It was remastered in the game's final DLC as Chinatown, utilizing the original engine assets. It included significant changes addressing the major issues I've already mentioned in this video, like the main base design, empty spaces on streets, and even moving the D flag across to the nearby square for more protection. Although not including any heavy armor, it retained almost all of its original pathing and landmarks, all themed out as a downtown LA Chinatown environment. Further minor adjustments were made to alleyways and accessible buildings, and shops were filled in with more assets and realism for cover. Given its smaller scale, it had phenomenal map flow and worked exceptionally well with Hardline's main game modes. So completely decked out in Easter eggs, fireworks, decorations, and nighttime lighting, Chinatown was a spectacular remake, improving on the original map in grand fashion. To be clear, it is Chinatown, not Grand Bazaar, which earns a spot in the Best Maps category. It would be wrong to avoid the topic of Grand Bazaar's Rush variant, as it remains one of the best maps in Battlefield 3, albeit preferably when it's represented on its recommended player count of fewer than 32. This Rush layout pits the teams in a very close quarters battle for much of the map, which begins near the junction and progresses sector by sector clockwise around the main roads until reaching the final Russian base in the northwest corner. While I'm not particularly fond of the position of the interior MCOM on the first sector, nor the battle down the streets for the second, this map is arguably a good example of Rush in a well-developed grind setting. The one major vehicle, the US tank, featured on the map at the start of the second sector, is truly a focal point of the fight. Usually, the victory lies in how well the US team helped its tank push, while coordinated anti-tank play was critical to Russian defense. Grand Bazaar is ultimately a struggle, an infantry madhouse, an urban layout which appears on the surface to be inspired by Battlefield 2 staples like Sharkey, Karkand, and Jalalabad, and yet fails miserably to emulate their playstyle, pathing options, or dynamic gameplay. While it is far more enjoyable than the insanity of Metro, the spawn camping issues and incredibly problematic main base layout are critical design flaws, essentially wasting the time of many players when a lockdown occurs. When balanced, though, or with the appropriately sized server, the small environment and alleyways do provide just enough ability to avoid the ongoing catastrophe in the center, should one desire it, and that is a good thing. While the 64-player slog was occasionally too much for many gamers, the 3-flag Conquest Small version was a beacon of success for smaller player counts and notably competitive 8v8 leagues, which participants ranked among the game's best. Rush, Squad Rush, and Team Deathmatch also utilized nearly every inch of the streets and alleys, allowing for fast-paced infantry matches outside of its usual explosive bombardment. Even though Grand Bazaar does not make the best map category because of its layout troubles, the replayability and success of most game modes does make it an iconic, if not flawed, staple of Battlefield 3.